Hey, this is Mr. Turk. Today we're going to learn how to make kind of a vintage postcard graphic. It's kind of based on this video, but a bit simpler. So just make sure when you're watching and following along with the steps that once you see a step that you pause the video and actually go do it in your file. I provided some photos for you guys to use. Try to follow along as best you can. And make sure you rewind if you missed a step or you're not quite sure. Talk to your partner, ask questions once you watch the video and try to do it yourself. First step is really easy. We're going to set up our file. And the way we want our file to be is landscape. So we're going to click on New File here. And we want to pretend we're making a graphic for 2 whole pages, like a splash page. So if you go to the print category, the size you want is tabloid. Tabloid is 2 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper side by side. And we want it landscape because when you open the book, that's how those pages are oriented. And we're just going to title this splash page, right? Doesn't matter what sport you pick or what you call it for now. We're just practicing. Click create. As soon as you make your file, Photoshop has a tendency to crash. So what you want to make sure you do is go to File, Save As. Make sure you save your page to wherever you keep track of your files, your yearbook folder in your iDrive, your D drive, or your OneDrive. Click Save. And when you're working on your project, right, the fastest way to save your file is Control S or File Save. Just make sure you do that often. Sometimes Photoshop crashes. Before we start though, right, we need to be aware of the edges of our page, and we need to be ready to make room in the gutter of our page. When you open up a book, the center of the book is the gutter, and if you put anything important in there, nobody's going to see it because it's going to be folded into the binding of the spine. So let's start by going to View, Guides, and we're going to make a new guide layout. And this isn't going to be terribly complicated. Right now, this has like a bunch of columns and rows. You only need 1 column, and you only need 1 row for now, right? So that's your margins space, right? Check the box for margins, right? And the gutter, you just add 2 columns right here. And you can see there's a little bit of space here for the gutter. You can increase that space, right, to like 0.3 or 0.4, right? Just be aware that anything that's on the edges or anything that's in the center is probably going to get cut off or isn't going to be visible. So you want to avoid putting important graphics or information in the center or the edges. So now we're going to click OK, right? And you're going to go to your Properties panel on the right-hand side of the screen. You want to make sure that you lock your guides in place. Okay, if you don't see these little handy guide buttons in your Properties panel, you can go to View, Guides, and Lock Guides right here. Okay, you don't want them to move around. You're just letting these sort of show you where your edges are and where the gutter is. So now we need to make our type. So go to the Type tool, right? Click on the Type tool once, and we want to click on kind of the left-hand side. We're just going to click 1 time. And let's pretend this is spring sports, right? You can type out spring sports. You can type out greeting to spring or make some kind of clever theme-related title. For now, I'm just going to delete sports, right? You want at least 5 letters. It doesn't matter what you type. If you want to make this real, pick a splash page for a section like academics, right? Right now I'm using the yearbook postcard font. So I'm just going to highlight this text. To make it bigger in the floating toolbar, you can click and drag on this little T icon to make it really big. You can also change the size right up here in the control panel. Same thing, click and drag. Over here in the properties panel, same thing. You can change the size. I want to make sure that this is really, really big and it fills the entire graphic here. So I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger, but I'm also going to decrease the space between letters. That's called tracking. So this setting right here, I'm going to click and drag on this icon, kind of get the letters a little closer together. And you'll notice this is kind of finicky. This font isn't well made. I made this from scratch. So if you want more control, put your cursor in the field and use your scroll wheel to kind of scroll down. If you notice letters are too close, right? Like the P and the R here, that is the individual space between letter pairs, and that you control by changing the kerning. So I'm going to increase the kerning between the P and the R, and this looks okay, right? So now that my settings are what I want them, right? I can do a couple more things in this menu. I actually want a little bit of warped text. So I'm going to go to the top of my screen, and there's this handy little Create Warp Text button. I'm going to click on that button, right? And I'm going to choose the style of Rise, which is kind of that classic postcard look. And right now it's a bit too extreme, so I'm just going to turn down the bend just a little bit. And you guys can play with distortion. You can pick different styles if you want. I think this looks good, so I'm going to click OK. I'm going to click the check mark at the top of my screen. So before I even begin, right, you can see my R is in the gutter. I don't want that there. So I'm actually going to take my move tool here. I'm just going to kind of move that right there. And actually, before I even start, I'm just going to double click. I'm going to put my cursor between the R and the I. And I'm just going to add a lot more kerning so that these things don't get swallowed up by the gutter, right? So again, those handy guides kind of let you know, like, hey, you know what? This space here is going to be eaten up by the center of the book. So that looks really good. I know it looks kind of weird because of the extra space, but just trust me, when you see it in the book, it'll make sense. So now we're going to add our photos to our letters. And that's really easy. Just, you know, it doesn't need to be perfect. You're just practicing, right? These aren't all spring sports. But to put your image in your file, just drag and drop it. Okay? And you want it to be about the size of one letter. Okay? So click and drag on the corner. You don't need to hold shift anymore. Make it, you know, about the size of the letter, roughly. And then click done. And for now, we actually don't want to see this right on top of our letter here, right? We want to add a couple more photos to this. So let's just add our couple extra photos here. So I'm going to go to my layers panel. I'm going to hide this layer. And I'm just going to add the rest of the photos. And again, just resize them. This is going to be the R. Click done when you're done transforming. And then hide them. Okay, so I've got, you know, 2-3 photos in here. I'm not going to do the whole graphic, but you get the general idea, right? They're roughly the size of their letters, right? You can click on the eyeball to show or hide them. And what we need to do is we need to select the letter S and use that selection as a layer mask for our track and field photo. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on our type layer to let Photoshop know I want to select the objects on this layer. And then we want to click and hold on our object selection tool here. And we want to click on our magic wand tool. Okay. Magic wand tool is just a really fast and easy way to select all the same colored pixels. So I actually want to select the letter S here. So I'm just going to go down to my S and click on the S. You'll notice that now there are these moving dotted lines around the S. These are called the marching ants. That means it's selected. So now that my S is selected, I want to go back to my layers panel here, right? And I want to show my track and field photo by clicking on the eyeball, right? And we don't need to worry about positioning right now. What we want to do is we want to add a layer mask. And you can do that multiple ways. You can click on the layer mask icon in the floating toolbar right here. You can click on the layer mask icon at the bottom of the layer panel right here, right? It doesn't matter where you click. This right here is a layer mask, okay? So now I'm just going to repeat that process one more time, right? Again, make sure you click on your type layer, right? we want to select the type, go to your wand tool, right, by clicking and holding on the object selection tool and choosing the wand tool. Click on the letter you want to select, okay, and then go to your layers panel and turn on the layer that you want to add a layer mask to. Click on that layer so that it's selected, right, and active, and then add a layer mask by clicking the layer mask icon in your floating toolbar, or at the bottom of the layers panel, click on the layer mask icon. And right now we're not worried about position, we're just adding the layer mask. So I'm going to do it one more time. Right, click on the type tool, click on the letter, back to layers, right, add a layer mask. Okay, so once you've done this a couple of times, right, just repeat this process for each letter so that you get it kind of memorized. Now that you've got images in your letters, okay, you can kind of play around with the positioning. So what you want to do is you want to switch to your move tool, okay? And I'm going to use this football player as an example here. If I just click and drag on it, it's going to move the letter and the image, right? It's going to move the image with the mask, because if you look at the layers panel, right, the image is linked to the layer mask. So if I want to move the image around, but I don't want to move the layer mask, I'm going to click on this little chain link icon to unlink the image from the layer mask. So now I'm going to click on the image, right? And that allows me to click and drag on the image to reposition it. And you'll notice that there are these bounding box handles around my image, right? If you don't see these, click on this little gear icon, turn on transform controls, right? And this allows you to, if you want, resize your image. Every time you do this, though, you need to click done or the check mark at the top of the screen to confirm your position. And then once you're done with this, I highly recommend that you link the image back to the layer mask. So again, I want to move the baseball player around here. So I'm going to click on the chain link icon. I'm going to click on the thumbnail for the image, and I'm just going to click and drag on that baseball player until he's in frame, and then link those up again. Same thing for the track and field. I'm going to click on the image. I'm going to unlink the two, and then click and drag to kind of position that track and field player in the S. So once you've got this figured out, right, you can add a little bit more extra, like, kind of flavor to your graphic here. And you can do that one or two ways, right? You can do it layer by layer, or you can just do it to the type layer that's at the bottom, as long as you don't move them around, right? To add layer styles, remember, you just double click on a layer. And you can do this to each individual layer or just the bottom layer. To add an outline, right, just check the box for stroke, click on the word stroke, and then you can click and drag to kind of change the settings here. We could also add things like, you know, if we wanted a little bit of color here, right, we can add a color overlay, right? Now, this is going to affect only the letters in the background, right? But the reason I show you this is because I'm going to click OK. You can do this to individual layers. So let's say I want to add like kind of a color overlay to this football player, right? I can double click on this layer. I can check the box for color overlay. Let's pick like a green color here. Click OK. And let's change our blending mode to overlay and maybe turn down our opacity here. Right? So that doesn't look great, but if you experiment, right, this is where you kind of set your graphic apart from all the other graphics in the yearbook, right? Make some different choices, have a little bit of fun, you know, maybe add some stuff to the background, right? That's the basic steps, though. When you're done, you want to make sure that you save your file, okay? So make sure you save your file, right? Save it as a Photoshop document, and make sure you keep track of this Photoshop document. So if you're not sure you're going to keep track of it well, go to File, Save a Copy, and make sure you save a copy in multiple locations. So save a copy in the yearbook drive, save a copy in your D drive, upload a copy to your OneDrive, give a file to your friend, right? Keep track of this file because we might make changes to it later on. When you're ready to put it in the yearbook, you're going to make sure that you save a really high resolution, high quality JPEG copy of this file. So when you're all done, File, save a copy, right? And you can save 2 different copies if you want. You can save a regular JPEG copy, right? And you can also save a PNG or PNG copy. I would save both just in case, right?